Welcome to the 700 Club. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, after an all-night negotiation, there's still no agreement in Congress to raise the debt ceiling. Republicans did offer a proposal to extend the debt limit into December.
There is a caveat to the proposal offered by Mitch McConnell. George Thomas has more on that and the severe global consequences if the debt ceiling isn't raised.
Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell's offer, at least in the short term, will allow Democrats to raise the debt ceiling so that America can keep paying its bills. But his proposal comes with a caveat. In a statement released on Twitter, McConnell said his plan will allow Democrats to use normal procedures to pass an emergency debt limit extension at a fixed dollar amount to cover current spending levels into December. McConnell had given the Democrats months to raise the debt ceiling on their own through the process known as reconciliation, but they never did.
The Democratic leaders wanted solutions. They wanted to turn their failure into everybody else's crisis.
With 11 days to go before the country hits the borrowing ceiling set by Congress, the parties must still finalize an agreement to prevent the government from going into default. The White House wants a long-term suspension of the debt limit.
If we're looking at the best options, why kick the can down the road a couple of more weeks? Why create an additional layer of uncertainty? Why not just get it done now? That's what we're continuing to press for, and that's our first choice.
A study by Moody agrees that a default would be a cataclysmic economic scenario that would rock global markets, cost up to 6 million jobs, and wipe out up to $15 trillion in Americans' household wealth. Every area of federal spending would be affected. $20 billion in Social Security payments to seniors. Paychecks to our military would stop along with payments to suppliers. And other government checks and spending would stop. Retirement funds could also take a hit. And the impact would spread throughout the economy. People who don't get government checks could have trouble paying their bills, which would hurt local utilities and businesses, leading to layoffs.
The effects would be cascading, so day one would be bad, but the cascading effects in the ensuing weeks could go anywhere from a recession to a complete catastrophe for the global economy.
The government's credit rating could be hurt, and interest rates would rise, making mortgages and other loans more expensive.
Our fragile recovery would be thrown into reverse. We would likely experience a recession. Millions of jobs would be lost, and the pain would endure well past the resolution of the crisis.
Many analysts argue the debt ceiling debate is a symptom of a deeper problem.
The reality is the U.S. government continues to make more promises than it has the ability to pay. And that's what leads us to this problem. This is, Senator Manchin just a few weeks ago says this is the height of fiscal insanity. When we cannot even pay for the existing social programs, we're going to add a whole bunch more.
For now, Senate leaders McConnell and Chuck Schumer appear to be on their way toward finalizing a deal for a short-term extension. But in 2 months, both parties could be right back where they are now, debating how to deal with Washington's exploding debt. George Thomas, CBN News.
We've been debating this in Congress for some time. This isn't a new crisis. It seems like every few months or so, we're running yet again into the federal debt limit, and it's been going on for some time. But both parties are to blame for this. This isn't something brand new. You go back to the Bush administration 20 years ago, you had a vice president say federal deficits don't matter. And so that was the sort of prevailing wisdom, if you will, if you want to call it wisdom, in our government. And so as a result, nobody ever really wanted to deal with the issue. And the issue is we're spending more money, far more money. This isn't a little bit, far more money than we're raising in taxes. Over time, this isn't sustainable. Now, what's the current theory is called new money theory, that when you're the global currency, you're able to print as much money as you want to. And what they do is they call it, well, we'll expand the ledgers at the Federal Reserve. We'll expand the balance sheet. And so that just means the Federal Reserve is going to buy up all the bonds that the government has to issue in order to print all this money. At some point in time, you run out of that. And at what point of time is that? Is that at 30 trillion? Is that at 40 trillion? Is that at 50 trillion? At what point in time does another currency become more interesting to the world market? As long as we're monetizing our debt, which means we get to print it and then have the world economy essentially pay for our excess spending, we're just spending ourselves into a hole. And literally at this point in time, we can't dig our way out. The good news is most of this we owe ourselves. And so at some point, somebody's going to say, well, why don't we just forgive the debt that's on the books? But I haven't seen that. In the meantime, if the federal debt limit isn't raised, then you start having default scenarios where you default on those bond payments, you default on Social Security payments, you can't pay your military, you can't pay all the government workers, you can't do these things. And the cascading effects through money markets, through all your 401k retirement plans is truly catastrophic. It will be a nightmare scenario that will make 2008 seem tame. So why is this happening now? Well, it's politics is being played. And so the government is literally freezing up. I point to the Democrats and say, you have a majority. You won the last election. You have the executive branch, you have the Senate, and you have the Congress. Get your act together and get us out of this mess. In other news, a federal judge has ordered Texas to suspend a new law that banned most abortions in the state since September. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That's right, Gordon. U.S. District Judge Robert Pittman issued the order Wednesday, freezing the law which bans abortions after 6 weeks once a heartbeat is detected. The decision is the first legal blow to the Texas law since the Supreme Court allowed it to go into effect last month. The Biden administration came out strongly against the law, directing the Justice Department to challenge it. Press Secretary Jen Psaki saying in a statement that the fight to protect abortion has only just begun. That's why the president supports codifying Roe v. Wade. Now, Marjorie Dannenfelser, the pro-life Susan B. Anthony list, criticizes the judge's decision, writing, an unelected judge has interfered with the clearly expressed will of Texans to protect unborn children with beating hearts. Turning now to a growing controversy over free speech at school board meetings. A new directive allows school boards to report parents if they feel they are threatened. The fallout centers on Attorney General Merrick Garland tasking the FBI and U.S. attorneys to investigate and prosecute threats, intimidation, or harassment. That's drawn the ire of at least one member of Congress who says Washington has no business trying to sideline parents in their own children's education. CBN Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson brings us more.
This past year, there's been no shortage of news coming out of packed school board meetings, with parents voicing their concerns on policies ranging from critical race theory to transgender students to pandemic restrictions like mask mandates.
You're telling us how to run our community?
In this letter to the Biden administration, the National School Board Association claims education leaders are under immediate threat, adding the actions of some parents are a form of domestic terrorism. In response, Attorney General Merrick Garland directed the FBI to get involved.
I think any time you want to make your point, that when it gets beyond a reasonable discussion, that's a bad way to make it. But they have to be able to make it, and you don't want the feds or bureaucrats interfering with the process.
Senator Mike Braun, a former school board member, tells CBN News parents need to have the primary say in their child's education.
When there's sincere discussion, even if it gets a little heated, that's a First Amendment right in the most important arena where we teach our kids, where we instill those early values.
Braun believes families and local school boards should dictate school curriculum, not federal mandates.
I think they're trying to distract from the content that they want to push forward critical race theory and direct traffic from here down, which they seem to want to do on everything.
Brown recently questioned Education Secretary Miguel Cardona on who should be in control of kids' education.
Do you think parents should be in charge of their child's education as the primary stakeholder?
I believe parents are important stakeholders, but I also believe educators have a role in determining educational programming.
Brown believes his response could preview federal school mandates to come.
And he wouldn't retract it either. That tells you how dug in they are on wanting to do things from here to dictate what we do in our own school systems.
Brown believes schools are run best when state and local governments are at the helm, instead of Washington lawmakers dictating policies that will never work in all 50 states. Reporting from Virginia, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
Thank you, Abigail. Health officials are cautiously hopeful that the country is coming out of the latest COVID surge. New cases are down 40% over the last 3 weeks, and deaths decreased by 15% since mid-September rather.
Finally turning a corner on this specific surge. There's been some peaks and some valleys, and it's hard to tell if this is going to stay low forever, but at least we're in good shape.
Still, some cities are doubling down on mandates. Beginning November 4th, Los Angeles will require proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test to enter bars, restaurants, gyms, shopping malls, movie theaters, and other venues. Pharmacies and grocery stores are exempt. New York City is also considering new mandates on public workers like police and firefighters. Well, as we all well know, for months, the pandemic shut down public concerts and tours. Filmmakers Andrew and John Irwin took advantage of that stop down to produce a documentary on what they call the untold story of Christian music. It features stars like Toby Mac, Amy Grant, Stephen Curtis Chapman, Kirk Franklin, and more in a film called The Jesus Music. Ephraim Graham spoke with some of those artists, including executive producer Michael W. Smith.
But a lot of hymns are close your eyes singing to God. I wanted to sing with my eyes wide open, singing to each other.
This thing, Jesus music, found its way in my hometown, and it changed my life.
This is the Jesus Music.
Yeah, there was tension. DC talk.
Here's the deal.
I've never shared this with anybody.
The Irwin brothers share the humble beginnings, the trials and triumphs in this untold story of Christian music.
I wouldn't be sitting in this chair if it hadn't been for Amy taking a chance on this kid from West Virginia.
Michael W. Smith opens up in the film and also serves as executive producer. What surprised you most of the story behind the music, if you will?
I think probably hearing everybody's story, the backstory of other artists, of the struggle, you know, what people have gone through, adversity, and how they survived and how they came out on the other side of it.
What made you say yes to being a part of this storytelling?
Maybe this movie is the catalyst of this next revival that we've been praying for so long. How sweet that would be.
To see the richness of hope land upon someone's spirit via rhythm, rhyme, and melody. Sound. I don't understand it.
It also features popular Christian artists including Lauren Daigle, Lecrae, Amy Grant, and Kirk Franklin. Tell me about your contribution to this and why you said yes.
My experience in this genre, I pray, can shed light through some of the difficulties of race, religion, that has sometimes been counterintuitive to the true heart of Jesus Christ.
And many more Christian music powerhouses.
Let's not forget, music is God's idea.
The music documentary is in theaters now.
Music was a lifeline.
Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
A lot of recognizable faces in that package. Thanks, Ephraim. Gordon, back to you.
It looks like it's going to be a wonderful movie, and just the whole question, why does music, why does rhythm and sound and melody and rhyme, why are these things so important to us? And you have to come away with the conclusion, well, God designed it that way. Music has a wonderful ability to reach to your spirit, to your soul, and it also crosses all languages, all barriers. It's an amazing thing, and I view it as God's communication vehicle. When he wants to talk, he usually does it through a song.